Isham, and this is World's Creative Identities. At each episode, I will be speaking with someone who is passionate about truly seeing others for who they are. Journalists, documentary makers, therapists, designers, teachers, and so many other types of empaths who are able to celebrate our unique identities and creative expressions. Today, I have the pleasure of being with one of my besties, Kale Connor, who is known to have many ongoing projects at all times. They are UX designers specialized in accessibility and user experience justice, self identified wannabe rock star, a crazy, inspiring person who decided they could also go back to university and study architecture while working. And I really wanted them to join me today because they have taught me a lot throughout our friendship. And when it comes to not putting people into boxes, especially. So, hello, Kale, and thanks for being with me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really happy because there we have been having so many nice conversations through our friendship, and I was like, I want to immortalize one of these conversations. And so maybe we can do as I do with other people who I know less than I know you, but just so we stick to the program and people get to know you, I like to start a little bit with your own world. And just to get to know a little bit how your brain functions, how you relate to the world. Can you tell us a little bit about what type of kid you were, what type of games you like to play, what made little you happy in the past?
Yeah, so I grew up in the United States in Virginia and on sort of like a house that was in progress because my parents um built a house, but they got all the stuff done that they couldn't do themselves, and then everything that was they could do themselves we did as kids together, like as a family. So everything from like doing tile, paint. I painted the walls of my room when I was 4 years old,
Oh,
and stuff like
that's
that.
cute.
Um, and like uh, I was just playing in the like sand, but the sandbox was actually the sand that my dad was using to like mix with
Yeah.
cement to like make a wall and stuff. So like um, and then also the house is surrounded by a forest, so we spent a lot of time in the woods. My dad was always cutting down dead trees and like sort of managing the woods, and we would use them to make big fires and like have family sort of gatherings around the fire and stuff. So
No,
that
it's
was really nice. And I spent a lot of time, I mean, I spent a lot of time with my family, but also alone because I would end up kind of wandering in the woods or building little buildings out of scrap wood or whatever on my own or with my little sister. Um, so yeah.
yeah. And were the others like you too? Like, were your sisters also looking to transform matter like you, or was it more you?
More me. I mean, my little sister and I were always making stuff, but my sister was more like there would be, I think, characters in the I would be building the building that the characters would live in, and then and then my older sister, she's much older, so she was like a teenager being like doing teenager stuff.
But that's so cool. Like you really lived in a place that gave you lots of resources to play with and to
Yeah.
explore. Do you think that because I know that you did go and study art later on, do you think this has something to do with it, or is it because you had the artsy genes in you that you were doing all
Well,
this already?
I think it's both because my mom's an art teacher, but she also just has like a million projects.
Yeah.
Did we get disconnected or are we okay?
No,
Because it paused for a second.
I think we're still
Okay.
together.
Okay. Um, so my mom and then my dad also has a million projects that are more that like always about like building something or gardening or and so I think just creating in general. And my sisters have also like turned into, I mean they were always I think also like big creators. And um, and I think that's where it came from. It was also like my mom, whenever we would have friends over, if it was like just like um a like weekend or something, she would create activities for us, like
Wow.
doing tie dye or doing like painting together and stuff. And so it was just part of my life automatically. And still, like if I'm with my mom, and it was really cute when my family came to visit. My mom just brought these little um, blank postcards made of watercolor paper, and so the whole time the four of us were just like we would sit at cafes and like paint little scenes, and then we'd send each other the postcards later. And
Oh, that's
so
so
it's
cute. So
yeah,
romantic. That's when she came to visit you in Paris, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it's just like always been a part of my life, and just creating in general. And I guess art school seemed logical because, well, first of all, I was like, I can't get into any other school because my grades were shit.
I didn't know
But
that.
yeah, no, I mean, they weren't that bad. But I didn't feel like a huge. I mean, I knew that I wanted to do something in like design probably, but it was just easier to get into art school and just go from there. So.
And be in your element. Like you knew how to do all of those things. And
Yeah, and I knew how to like I was just like I'll just take pictures of all the stuff I made and
yeah.
you know.
But there was something about also like architecture schools being too pricey, I think, in the States. So you were also considering, or you weren't?
Well, I wouldn't have been able to get in, I think. Maybe it's possible, but I just didn't have the grades, and I also was terrified of math, which actually is a problem, but
Currently, you mean?
currently yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
because
right
I've
now,
decided yeah, I decided to go uh uh 2 years ago. I decided to go to architecture school finally. And I have been doing terribly in the math related classes, but it's okay. And then also just like the way you have to sort of quickly calculate things, like I can't do it. I'm like counting on my fingers. Like
AI will do that. Wait a
I
little.
know, yeah. I just yeah.
I guess it's good to understand the logic of how things are calculated, but yeah, that
Yeah.
won't stop you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool to always see how people connect to the world because, as you said, your sister was more of a storyteller, and you were the one like building the spaces for them. Like I have two nieces who are exactly like that. Like one of them is more like the builder, the other one is the teller. It's really cute. But something, so just to tell our auditors how we met, also is I don't know how many years ago now. Was it 7, 8?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. Well, so back then I had put together this meetup group called Creative Buddies, and you came to the first event, and then you were the one coming to even the because the first one was quite a success. There was, I think, around 20 people. And so Creative Buddies, what was it? I was looking to have friends who wanted to play around with concepts, ideas, people who had other skills like you. Like I can't do much with like trying to construct things, put together things. I'm more with like words and stories, just like the comparison we were doing before. And so I was doing battles, like writers versus people who could draw and stuff. We had a lot of fun. And then there were some events where I was with my card at the bar, and thankfully Kale was there because otherwise I would have been alone drinking my little sad beer. And then after a while I was like, okay, I'm going to meet Kale anyway. Why am I like bothering with this meetup? So then I stopped doing that. But I think that is something very characteristic to you also. Like I from getting to know you, I have a feeling you're very comfortable going to communities, going to places like you're the one who talked to me about this place called La Corderie in Paris.
Hmm.
And can you tell us a little bit about what that was?
Yeah, well, first of all, me being comfortable going to places is very new. Like as a kid and as a teenager, I mean, I was still going to places, but I was terrified of talking to people, and I still have that terror sometimes. I'm not naturally somebody who's very social, I think, but I built that as like a necessary muscle because otherwise I get lonely. But
Yeah.
um, uh, but yeah, the ecology is really interesting, and I think this exists in different forms in other places and stuff. But basically, it's an association where you give time. Time acts as like a currency, so
Hmm.
you give your time, and in exchange, people can give their time to you for other things. So like if you are like a hairdresser and it takes you like an hour to do somebody's hair, then you have credit for an hour and you can spend it somewhere to like get somebody to help you fix your car or something like that.
Hmm.
So it's the idea behind it is like it's people's time that's valuable. It's not the market value of their
Yeah.
labor.
It's not money, it's
Um,
time. It's
yeah, and importantly, I think it's like you the market value of somebody who the job of like a hair of somebody who cuts hair versus somebody who's like a programmer or
Mhm.
something, the difference is huge in the market, but actually it's just an hour of someone's time.
Yeah.
And so why
You
should
have
that
the
be
knowledge.
valued? Yeah, why should that be valued so vastly differently?
Yeah.
Um and
That's a pretty
so
good equalizer. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
yeah, um
Yeah.
but it was cool. I mean, the it doesn't work super well just because we're in this market headspace of like, yeah, I could trade my time to get a haircut, but like I get paid actually 10 times more than the person getting the haircut is like, so people who have more high paying jobs are not really on the platform very much.
Yeah.
And also it's a little bit hard, I think, for people um to put a lot of effort into it when it's like, yeah, you're gonna get this time, but like you have the currency now, but like, what are you gonna spend it on? And I actually ended up giving. There's this woman who was um a, quite a bit older, um, who was I think retired, and she just wanted to learn how to use Photoshop and
Mhm.
Illustrator. And so I just gave her lessons, and she had taught somebody something before, so she had like a lot of credit. And so now I have all this credit actually I haven't used, but it's just the concept of it I really like.
But I remember
And
you used it once when you were moving, I think, with an old lady
yeah,
who had a car. And
yeah,
that's what really made this story stick with me because in the outside world it looks like you're more an introvert and I'm more an extrovert, but like those are situations that I never dare to go into, like, and imagining you in the car with an old lady like sitting next to each other, and it's not that like it's not the age factor, it's just it's someone you don't know, and for me it was like, wow, as soon as there are like set rules in the social interaction, Kale seems to be more comfortable. While
yeah,
I would be feeling like I need to entertain this person, like less these days, less now. I have worked on this a lot, but like initially, that's where I was. And I find it very interesting how that works for you. Can you tell us about that time, like with that lady who helped you?
well, I mean, it wasn't a super comfortable situation for me just because making small talk with people in general is kind of hard, but I was like, this kind of the spirit of the platform is also that um you just meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. And she and I didn't really have any kind of connection or anything, but I can imagine that if you that it would be possible, that people often maybe that happens. But
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, it's almost like, okay, this is a kind of transactional situation in some ways. So like the pressure is off, I think, to
Yeah, because she agreed to the deal, and like,
yeah,
so you don't owe
I don't
them that. You're not like the host or
exactly,
something.
just like I don't owe the baker to like have a whole conversation when I'm buying
Mhm.
bread. But I think, yeah, maybe the difference is like if it's an association that you feel a little bit more pressure to do that. But I didn't feel like a huge. I was just like, "What's your life?" And she was like, I don't I don't want to really share it. She didn't say it like that, but just her vibe was just like, uh, not much to say, and I was like, okay,
No, but having comfort with silences, I think, is also part of communication. Like, I don't
yeah,
think communication has to be constantly talking. And it's true that
yeah,
in this podcast, I'm asking a lot of people about like how to open a safe space, how to go into different people's worlds, how to be invited there. Well, sometimes you're not invited, and it's okay.
yeah, yeah. That's okay too, and also you can, I think, be invited in silence. Like I find that, um, especially in my romantic relationships or relationships where I spend a lot of time with people, like with my family and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, making space to just sit there and be quiet together, I think is really important
Yeah.
and really looked over because you feel like, oh, I have only this time with this person, but like you are spending time with that person when you're being quiet together. And like a couple summers ago, I went to the United States and I was with my dad for like only my dad for like several weeks because it was like COVID and I went to get like a vaccine and stuff. And we ended up just like having a really nice time, just like sitting, like we'd go down to the river and just put chairs in the river and like have beers and just sit there and like
Oh, that's so cool.
not even say anything. Like we would just have like low key conversations, but we were just like chilling in nature. And I wouldn't think, you know, people really like, especially since I don't live in the United States, like I usually feel an urgency to spend to be talking and to be communicating with people, but you just kind of have to sometimes let the silence
Yeah, now
be.
I want to do that. I want to go by the river and have a beer. It's Friday. How can I make this happen?
Yeah, too bad it's a bit too cold to sit in the river, but
Yeah, that's totally true. Like I'm in Luxembourg, so I was thinking, where can I go? Innsbruck to windy, like.
yeah,
But it's going
bring
on
some
a,
hot chocolate or something instead.
yeah, yeah. It's a wish list situation for the future.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're talking a little bit like with your father, with that lady in the car. Um, I said in the introduction that you taught me not to put people into boxes. One of those situations I'd like to talk about, that learning moment for me, where I had a little resistance because we do, don't we, sometimes when someone's telling us to do things differently. I remember, so actually, Worlds is a naming you know very well because the first time we used it, it was together in a project. And then I loved it so much that I was like, I'm sure I'm going to get back to this naming one day. But anyway, we were organizing an event to present our company, and I was sending questionnaires, I think, out to people who would come. And I had just been taught automatically in the advertising business that when you do a questionnaire, there used to be name, age, sex, like gender, these things. So I was a bit proud not having put gender. And then you caught me on the fact that I left age in the questionnaire. And then I was like, yeah, well, we need to know that. Like, how old will be people who are coming? And you were like, why? I was like, well, because maybe young people know less stuff, the old people know more stuff. You were like, do they? Really? Can't a young person know a lot about history? Blah. And I was like, you're annoying. You're right. But I guess in the bigger picture, like not in for questionnaires of when people are coming to an event, but I guess there still is such a thing as generations, and like someone who's been um, through war, or actually people from today's generation are living in a world, for example, that has always been on fire. Like they came
yeah,
into a world that they always had this sense of being an animal living on a creature that's slowly dying. Like it's feels
mm,
like this. So I think there still are some impacts on how we feel, how we relate to the world. Like that. What do you think today about this? About the differences of generations or ages? Like, is there for you no informational value to age, or there still might be
No, I mean, but it's like anything. It's like we can think that we know something about somebody based on something about them, and then we can always be surprised.
Yeah.
And like right now, I'm being in architecture school. I spend a lot of time with Gen Z, um, and they are on their phones all the time.
So
They
that
are
is,
looking at TikTok, but not everybody.
yeah.
And and I don't know, I'm just surprised by them all, not all the time. Like I'm often surprised by them, and I'm often like um you know they, but everybody's different. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's different. And like those kids are there, like we're all there for the same reason, which is cool. And so
Yeah.
you can find a lot of commonality with people who are really seemingly different.
Yeah.
And for me, it's also like cultural difference because they're mostly French, and so they've um, grown up in the French school system, so they have a certain way of doing things in school, which is different than what I'm used to,
How different?
and
I'm curious because I always went
really different, or
to
so different. They're so used to just being in a hierarchical situation with their
yeah.
professors that and I'm constantly fighting with the professors, and luckily, like I realized that I have to make clear that I'm not a 20-year-old because a lot of them think I'm like 20,
Yeah,
and
it's
so
true
they're
that you
like,
don't have a real age giving away face. Like,
yeah, and so their reaction is kind of like, who is this little bitch? And I'm like, no, no, listen, I got a little bit of experience in life, like I'm not just like talking back. Um, And it's interesting because I think they're getting a little bit more used to the idea. Um, I'm in the third year now, and they're getting a little bit more used to the idea that you can have like an equal conversation
yeah,
with your teachers, but they were so scared in the beginning. And they'll just, the teachers will be giving feedback and they'll just be like kind of noting it down, like, oh, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And like they're afraid, there's this really strong fear that I notice, and I don't I'm not saying this is like not also in the United States the way students can be too, of just like they don't even want to ask a question because they're
yeah,
like scared that they're like dumb because
yeah.
they asked the question. And luckily, like they're getting like most of our teachers are like really nice, and they're just going to be like, you're not asking a dumb question, like it's fine. But there's still with some of the professors, there's this hierarchical
Yeah.
relationship. And I was having huge conflicts with my professor last semester because she's very much in this, like, I mean, she really wants to pretend that she's not, but she's very much in this kind of
Yeah, it's top down.
hierarchical, at teaching for 35 years in France. Like she's
Yeah.
just used to kids noting down what she says, and she told me I'm the most stubborn student she's ever met in her entire
Because
life.
you're questioning things, because you're
Yeah.
giving your own opinion on things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to dig in deeper. I'm not trying to just get the first answer that she gives me, like, no, this doesn't work. And I'm going to be like, well, why? Like, give me some more details. And like, what if we do it this way? And she's just not used to that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it can be kind of problematic in French, in the French system. But they're used to that. And also like with it's really funny because I hate the lecture classes. It's 2 hours where you just have to sit there and listen to somebody, and I can't do it. Like, and they're all just like, this is normal. And I'm like, wait, you're not bored? Like after half an hour you don't feel like you got to get up and move? And they're like, well, yeah, but like how else are you gonna learn things? And I'm like, what?
Yeah, I used to draw because I also went to the university in Paris, like 5 years at the Sorbonne, and I realized that's how my audible listening habits developed. Like I always had to draw stuff and get
Hmm.
some of my energy out so I could keep listening, but I couldn't just
Yeah,
be like this and getting things in because then like my mind was going elsewhere. But it's really interesting
yeah.
what you're saying because I think it also applies to company culture in France because
Hmm.
a few times, like I have been a freelancer, as you know, for a long time, and then I've been in different companies. And um, a few times when there were changes happening in the processes and stuff like that, when I went to speak to the authorities and to say that I don't think that's a good idea, or like, no, I don't like that, they were pretty surprised because they were like,
Mm,
"Who are you?" like
yeah,
we decide, like we're the managers, or we're the, and for me, no, we're just all adults co creating, like doing things
yeah,
together. So even if like you have a management position, that doesn't mean you're the superior human.
yeah,
That
and it
means
doesn't mean you have all the answers.
yeah.
And like you need help from other people to know what to do, and like
Yeah, and
so,
everyone's voice has value. Of course, at the end of the day, you can't have unanimity on everything all the time,
right.
like, or it doesn't work. But just that surprise moment, like on their faces, was always surprising to me. Like, why are you surprised that I have opinion like, on this thing? But yeah, it's interesting to see the cultural differences. And you're in an architecture university, like, so that's supposed to be the home of design thinking, the home of
Yeah, and
questioning
being
things.
open, yeah.
Yeah.
And which I feel there is like a generational difference too. Like the younger
Mhm.
teachers are much more um open, and they're like, "Hey, if you have questions, like ask questions during the lecture
Yeah.
courses." And like um and it, yeah, so it's changing, but it's slow. It's and I don't know. There's still going to be, I think, this hierarchy that there's just residual from the students coming from lycée, where
Yeah.
it's very, I guess, like
It is, but it's all gonna have to change because we observe all of these like parents trying to send their kids to Montessori schools or different types of schools, and
hmm
for now it's like um, only the rich people can pay schools where humans are treated like humans, like not robots or productivity machines.
yeah,
But so I think somehow it's gonna have to democratize itself, and like the Gen Z that you're talking about, they don't really like to do things they don't like.
hmm
From what I see, let's not generalize again, but like when I talk to teenagers lately, I envy their self validation levels, like that I did not at all have at their age. And they kind of empower each other too. I feel like I'm sure there are still lots of bullies and lots of problems in schools, but I feel like there is parts of the culture that is helping vulnerability to be valued and like to support each other. I don't know how do you observe a little bit their behavior to each other, or this university and hierarchical situation maybe maintains them in past behavior.
No, actually, I mean, that's something that I really noticed, especially, I mean, the school that I go to is, has small class sizes also. And the first year we had for the, project studio class, um, 15 people or 16 people or something. And, for the whole entire year, we were in the same class.
Mhm.
And the like solidarity and like, the kind of camaraderie that was built up during that time was like it was so nice to see, like everyone was being so lovely to each other and helping each other out,
Oh, that's
and
cute.
yeah, and really like lifting each other up. And there isn't this, it's really rare that I see a kind of um competitiveness that yeah, I mean, I almost not at all. Like they're really like not out to like one up each other or
Yeah,
anything.
no,
They're really there to like help each other out. And I actually think the hierarchical nature of the classes like lends itself to that, because it's kind of like us against the teacher in a way sometimes, where it's like this is not this isn't fair, and like it's not fair how you're treating my classmates and stuff. And so
Aw.
and what actually happened in this in my second year was there was a like social movement, and actually was in all of the because in France the architecture schools are all national architecture schools, and there are 20 of them. And in all of them, because one of the architecture schools had no funding and wasn't even able to hire st like pay their staff, so they had to shut down for the semester. And all of the other architecture schools joined in solidarity, and so the students
Mhm.
and some of the teachers even like shut down the classes, and we had alternative programming. It was really disorganized and chaotic, and um, but we were trying to get the administration and also the Ministry of Culture, which funds the architecture schools, to change the way that they're doing things and to give more funding and more space. Like for us, for example, in our school, we have 4 square meters or less than, it's like 2 square meters per student. So like if everybody's at the school, it's like terrible. It's trying to find a place to work.
Yeah.
Um, it's really hard. And so so yeah, and there were demands, and there were students um who still are really working to try and get things to improve in the system and in the individual schools. So that was really cool to see
Yeah, the
happen, and
involvement.
being yeah, and be involved in that and be like, oh, okay, you guys are you guys are all right. You're not totally downtrodden by this hierarchical system.
But
You actually
I also remember this thing that stayed with me because it was funny. Like the first day at integration, didn't they say, "Hey, hello, there's this other old lady there. Like you guys can talk or something"? Didn't one of them like
uh
decide that you were older than them and think being they were being friendly by putting you guys together?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, people were definitely like, "Oh yeah, I met another person who's your age," and because
Oh,
there's like
okay.
now there are only I think 3 or 4 of us who are over like 25 or something.
It must be
Um,
cool. Like I always have this wish of going back to school. Like I already did it once when I went to coaching school after 5 years of already working. But like going and learning as an adult, like as someone who knows why you're going there and is totally selfishly,
hmm
like because you enjoy the learning. I think it's really
yeah.
cool thing to do. I admire you a lot for doing this, I must say. I also wanted to ask you a little bit because, like, we're here to talk about how we go into different people's worlds and stuff. And I know that you have a different type of love life than most of my friends, let's say. And I think the type of love life you have brings you to meeting more people and falling maybe in love or liking someone more often than others. Can you tell us a bit about this? Because I think there are interesting things to look into there in terms of listening and opening yourself up to others and discovering others.
Yeah, I so there's two things I think there like I'm I identify as queer and also I guess I would say poly-relational at this point, maybe not. I mean polyamorous maybe. Um
Is that because you
and
don't fall in love each time, or like why didn't you want to go
well,
amorous?
I'm having a hard time with not a hard time, but I'm like I definitely want to have multiple uh like romantic and sexual and even loving relationships in
Mhm.
my life, whether that's like with people who are friends that I consider family, which like there are a few people in my life right now who are like that, um, or people that I have romantic or sexual relationships with, and um, and I'm also thinking a lot right now about like the difference between loving and being in love, and like what does that mean, and how what does that feel like, and like how much does it matter really? But but yeah, I mean like I don't yeah, I'm not monogamous sexually or romantically. I don't plan on being monogamous. And yeah, so like my sexual and romantic relationships are with people who are like on the same page as that. And so,
And
uh,
how do you
and
meet them?
uh, I don't know. In the queer community, like a lot of people are polyamorous or polyrelational. So it's kind of one of those things that you would talk about maybe like on a first date. But eh, like I don't know, I've met people in organically. I've met people through apps. Just like in all of if
Mhm.
I'm on a dating app, I always put my that I'm uh poly. I think I wrote right that I'm in open relationships,
Mhm.
plural. Um, but yeah, I mean, the thing for me that's important is um, the like our society kind of puts a hierarchy on romantic and sexual monogamous relationships as like, okay, you're gonna have one person, you do all the things with them, you you are gonna have a family with them, you're gonna live with them, your entire life is gonna revolve around them, and having like serious or like intense relationships with other people takes away from that relationship, which is just like not it's true and not okay for me. Like it feels really it's also I think a way in the patriarchy to kind of control people and control the way that they um their functions in society and um make people kind of subservient to a system that doesn't, you know, always do them good. So
I wonder if
so
you're not like a freelancer of love life, because like I'm a freelancer and a lot of people go crazy when they're like, how can you be feeling comfortable in being a freelancer in today's world? We need security and all these things. But I'm like in a monogamous relationship and happy to be with my boyfriend. But I'm thinking maybe like because in your love life, you're very happy to be alone when there aren't any other people. Like when, because being in a polyamorous situation, it means no one owes it to you uh, to live with you, to be there when you're sick.
yeah.
So, in a way, I guess your system works better for people who are comfortable with being on their own and who are not trying to sign like a togetherness partnership like
Well, I mean, there are polyamorous people who are married who have, um, or I do want to have long-term partnerships, and I do have long-term partnerships in a friendship way with people,
Mhm.
but there's no contract that's signed. It's like,
Yeah.
um, you know, the relationship is renegotiated or can be renegotiated when necessary or so
It's
for
more
me that's
flexible.
what
It's much more flexible. Like
yeah it's more flexible, but I think mm, um the trap with monogamy is to think that you are secure because more than half of relationships fail, I mean fail, quote unquote. uh it,
yeah, end up.
I don't and yeah and like people aren't together forever. Most people aren't together
Yeah. We
forever,
live much
which is
longer also.
what
We also live much longer. Like
we live much longer, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship is unsuccessful or successful if you if it ends.
yeah.
And there's this mindset in our culture that like if it's not your true love that you're with forever, it's a shit relationship and
Yeah.
it didn't like, and that's just not true. Like you can be with somebody forever or you can be with somebody for a couple months and that was good for that
Yeah.
relationship.
Exactly.
And and so like the idea that you have more security in a monogamous relationship, it's just not true. And it's just not like it's just and it's the same thing for jobs. I mean, in France, you have more protections if you are, if you have a contract and you have a salary and everything. So are there are safety nets put in place for you. And I guess if you're thinking more financially speaking, in some ways, if you're if you're married, you have maybe more of a safety net because, but it's also divorcing is very expensive. Um, but so what I'm trying to say is like um, in uh, your job or in your love life or whatever, these things are put in place to make you feel safe. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Yeah,
And it like being a freelancer or being a someone who has a salary or being a monogamous or non-monogamous, you know, it really depends on the situation whether or not you're in a safer situation or not.
yeah, it's
So
being safe within yourself first, I think. Like,
exactly,
how do you feel? And then I think there still is a little bit of character, like, because I mean, change is good, opening minds and questioning everything is good, but at the end of the day, I think it's also about everyone having the choice to define
yeah,
the types of stories they like to live, like what they like to be in. And
yeah. I mean, monogamy works perfectly well for many thousands of millions of people, and then non-monogamy could also work well for a lot of people. I
yeah,
mean, it does.
like short term, sometimes it's short term monogamy, and then you
Yeah.
renew
Yes.
with someone else. But it's still like one at a time, one person at
Yeah.
a time type of approach, or wanting to keep believing in the romantic stories that we inherited from the parents and stuff. It all depends also what you had in front of you when you were growing up. I think if you're in love with your
Yeah.
parents' story, like. My parents have been together for 45 years and they're still like looking at each other and holding hands. And like, of course, a part
Yeah.
of me is like, I want that too. Of course, they're not perfect. Like I've seen them also being very annoyed with each other, but yeah, that's okay. But yeah, the question I had for you, because I have this impression, but maybe it's wrong or maybe it won't be your reality, but when I'm within queer environments, let's say, I have this impression that you guys are so much more loving. like I, because I mean, until now, whenever I heard queer people talking about their dates or people they met, they're always like, "Oh, this girl, she was so beautiful, and she's so nice, also, sexy." Like, and part of me was wondering, is it because of this polyamorous situation where you're not having to be stuck with one person? So you're like, because I feel like when monogamous people go on dates, we're like, okay, so trying to quickly figure out the behavioral type of the person, how they react, how they are, and checking out physically and everything. Because you're like, okay, because if there is really a red flag I haven't seen, I'm stuck with this one. And I feel like when you can just casually be with someone and then not be with them, or be with them but then compliment maybe the parts you don't find in this person with someone else,
Hmm.
because I think a lot of people secretly dream of that. Like, oh, okay, I can be my sexy self with this one, be my funny self with this one, because this one doesn't get my jokes. And, you know, does it open for you, take the tension off a little bit when you meet people? Can you
Yeah.
more easily appreciate them?
Yeah, I don't know if it's more easily, yeah, I guess more easily appreciate them or just, and also just be like, there's no urgency here. Like, I could, like, if there's something between us, great. If there's not, fine. It's not
Yeah,
a big deal.
you're not
Like,
looking for someone. Like,
yeah, and also like, I don't know, you started talking about it from a queer perspective. I think there's the two perspectives also. It's like, I mean, because not all queer people are um, polyamorous or non-monogamous. And so that is something also I think that's like, I mean, and obviously this isn't everyone who's queer, but like this kind of openness to people just being like, well, you're just the kind of the way you are, and I can appreciate you or not. And um, that we, um, like if you politically identify as queer, your mindset is going to be more like everyone has their own individual way of being and of doing things, and it doesn't really have a negative impact on me if they're doing like living their life and being themselves. Actually, that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
So maybe,
It also comes from there. That
it also comes from there. And then there's not this, I mean, the thing that sucks about heterosexuality is, I mean, there are a lot of things in my point of view, but one of the main things is this societal hierarchy that's put in place automatically when I'm talking a lot about hierarchies.
yeah.
Um, it's interesting.
That's gonna be in the
I
title
guess,
of the episode.
yeah, I guess it's a theme. But you automatically have, um, I mean, of course, this isn't everyone who's heterosexual, but like, you have these defined roles that are, that that society has kind of hammered into us as like this is the way that it's going to be, and so you have to spend a lot of time trying to break down and break out of those roles. Or, I mean, of course, there's tons of people who just accept that and go with it, even if it's not themselves. And when you're in a queer relationship, there's no roles. You're just like, hey, I'm me. Like, take me or leave me. And like,
Yeah.
there's nothing in this situation, and that goes down to like, having sex too, because like queer sex, tends to be a lot more, uh, like you gotta just talk about stuff because there's no defined way of doing it. You're gonna have to like not negotiate, but like, figure out what people like and figure
Mhm.
out what the other person, is interested in doing and consents to doing. Whereas in heterosexual sex, there's a script that like people have maybe even learned from like porn and like watching terrible porn, and and uh and so yeah, the kind of, um uh, relationship between two queer people is gonna have to be a lot more, communication in general.
Yeah, I was taking down note because the more you break out the boxes, the more there needs to be talking and listening, but the more
Hmm.
there also needs to be creating. Because,
Yeah.
and I even find this in my own life in different places, like the more you're like not leading the life that was similar to the generations before, the more you need to stop and think about things like, how do I feel like I'm I guess a cis woman, and but still like sometimes you're like, yeah, but what does enter in the my definition of like woman or female, or like, okay,
Hmm.
I don't want to live even like in the professional life. Okay, I don't have to be an employee, but in my family around me, I'm the first one to ever
Mm.
break out that system. Or like, oh, am I gonna have kids? Am I gonna get married? What does it even still mean? And I feel like there is more and more internal fights. It's like growth, not, how do you say it, like, pains. You know how when your joints
Growing pains, yeah.
the growing pains, because it's not always easy to be free. Also, I feel like sometimes you're
Yeah.
like, oh, sometimes I'm like, if only I could just have been like, less open to all my options and just like do this and this like everyone else did. But I know that's not me. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't go through all those moments of family conversations to change things and values and stuff because I'm someone who likes to be in a box. But yeah, I guess there is more talks, more creativity. Because you always tell me also that, um, in a way, in polyamorous relationships, there's a lot of talking, right?
There's so much talk, and it can be really exhausting. And and sometimes you just want to have a good time, and then it's just like, no, we got to talk about our relationship. So, it's not for everybody, and it's hard also. It's difficult, I think, to have when you have a lot of relationships, then you end up spending a lot of time talking. But ultimately, I think most people just don't spend enough time talking and communicating with each other um, uh, about their relationship or about their needs and about their feelings. So there's a balance, of course, but
A lot of people
uh,
don't even know how to talk to themselves. So that's what I
yeah, they
find
don't.
interesting also. How do you understand why you're feeling? Like there are lots of adults who don't understand emotions very well. They're frustrated and angry at you, but they can't really help you understand why. Like
Yeah.
um does that ever happen in relationships you had so far without like any
Oh yeah, of
specific
course,
ideas? Like
of course.
yeah.
Yeah, because we're not taught how to be in touch with our emotions, and
Mhm.
we're like, you know, like you said, you can just be like, I'm angry, and it's like, well, wait, what does that mean? Why?
Yeah.
Why? And like, um, what's happening? And like, are you actually just hungry? Did you
Are you
exercise
angry?
enough? Like, are you just having a bad day? Like, and um, yeah, and so yeah, being polyamorous also means that you got to be a bit more, you got to try to, it's a constant process of trying to be like more in touch with your emotions,
Yeah.
being understanding the other person, and
Active listening.
yeah, to
Yeah.
yourself and others.
Well, that could be a nice transition if we want to talk a little bit about UX also, because as a UX designer, the part of your life that's paying for the architecture school also, you're specialized in accessibility. So you have to think of all the different types of users and their needs to make sure the digital spaces um, useful to and accessible, right? Can you tell us a bit
Yeah.
more about how that happens? Do you get data? Do you go observe? Like how do you understand what people need?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, and what I try to do is be be very in touch with users, and also y- um, being, I mean, I work with user researchers, and I also work with people who are, I guess, more, um, like focused on getting feedback from users. And there are quantitative parts of it, but like we're more focused on trying to, I mean, the best thing is just putting things in front of people and seeing what happens.
Hmm.
And um and uh learning as much as possible about um the the users that are using your product, but also just people in general. So, people are, as I keep saying, like, everyone's different, and my experience is not the same as other people's
Hmm.
experiences. And so being able to kind of cultivate an empathy towards all types of people and understand the experience of all types of people, which is like a huge thing and not really that possible, but it just really means um, that you have to try to get as much exposure to different people and to different viewpoints and to different life.
That's actually a good teaching for everything, though. Like, get exposed. Get exposed to a lot of people. That will
Yeah.
open your mind and that'll teach you. But is there any platform you had to design with an insight you weren't expecting that you can tell us about? Like, wow, I never thought someone would go through 4 pages and then end up here. Like, I don't know, like, was there anything where you had to put the button somewhere you never thought you should put a button? Was that, like,
um, I don't know. I The thing is that for me, I don't know. One of the things um, I used to work for somebody who's now a very good friend of mine, but um, she's 75, and she has been trying to use the computer for a lot. Like, she has a shop, and she's been trying to use the computer, and she uses Instagram and stuff. and just like it's really scary for her,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like almost like it gives her like a lot of anxiety to use it because she's afraid of um doing something wrong or breaking something, and she also has, she just doesn't have a lot of experience doing it and didn't, learned it when she was like quite a lot older. So it's interesting and still I sometimes I go and help her with her technology issues, and just watching her like use technology in the way that she has to navigate this really emotional relationship to it.
Mm-hmm.
While, for me, it's just like, these are just tasks. Like, this is
Yeah.
just a basic, like, everyday task for me. And for her, it's like an overwhelming difficulty. That was really surprising for me. Um, and I think like that's the way it is for a lot of people who haven't really had a lot of exposure to technology, and even
Mm-hmm.
um, like and to people who um, I think it's also like she has a big fear of like administrative tasks and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, and I think a lot of people a lot of people have that, and like I'm working, one of my clients right now is the French government and trying to make um, the uh, websites that we use for doing, taxes or doing getting your driver's license, etc. Like we're trying to make these easier to use, and you just have to remember like some of these people are doing this and have the stakes are really high.
Yeah.
Like making a mistake on your taxes or making a mistake on your
Been
immigration
there, done
papers.
that.
Yeah, exactly. It's really emotionally
Yeah.
something, and if you
Traumatic.
put on top of that, yeah, if you put on top of that the feeling of like I don't know how to use the computer anyway,
Yeah.
and then if you put on top of that, because we design for people with disabilities, like having a cognitive disability or having a
Mm-hmm.
visual disability and not being able to use the tool, it's like
Mm-hmm.
so many layers of just
I
like,
remember when we were working together for this website designed for people with psychosis and their families. And I remember reading that sometimes they were able to have words change places in a sentence. And like,
oh yeah,
um,
dyslexia, yeah, and dyslexia that can happen.
yeah, but in their situation, it was like movement, like,
Yeah,
and also like the colors and things should not be too bright and stuff like that. So it's true that it's really interesting sometimes to see that there needs to be multiple versions of a website, but you can click, right? I think I've seen in some accessibility tools that you may have
yeah.
multiple versions of the platform.
Which I'm not really a huge fan of. I prefer it to be accessible from the start, like for everybody. Like I think it's just better that way because I don't like the idea of like having a separate experience for different people because it's not inclusive. Like if and it's the same for like I'm really having a hard time with this in architecture school because um, I want to try to design things that are accessible for everyone, but it's so expensive and
Yeah.
it's takes so much space, and so you have to make um, and I'm really adamantly trying to be like, it's worth the money, like it's worth the
Mhm.
space, like it's good for everyone
Yeah.
to be able like because excluding people physically from society, which is a huge problem in France
Mhm.
because were just never designed for people that have
Yeah.
that have a reduced mobility, like even just like a shop that has like a step to go into it or like two steps to go into it, you're excluding anybody who is in a wheelchair or like a lot of people who have trouble going up steps, so
Mhm.
or even just people who come in with their uh what is it called, poussette,
Yeah.
the thing where you put your baby in and you're pushing it
Carrot?
around,
No, not
like
which. What's it called?
yeah, baby carriage, yeah.
Yeah.
Like so um so I'm really trying to like figure out. and and uh, and trying to do more research about like solutions to try to include people more in like
So you're more on the
um
one for all situation. Like up until now, the one we had for all was not for all. So we started to have multiple for different people, and now you're coming back to a
well,
different one for all, which is like
yeah, so I don't
compromise.
know. Like I do like the idea of like different things for different people because they have different preferences or because they have
Mhm.
different needs and everything. But it's really hard to do that with something that's supposed to be like a universal tool because
Mhm.
there is no universality.
Universal. Ah, weird.
There is
Universality.
no universality. There's no universality. Every everyone is different and everyone's experiences are different, and so but like we can't build 20 buildings, you know?
Yeah, and
Like for
we need to not divide the space where people meet. That's what's
that's
important, I think. If
yeah,
the space was anyway a place where only those people would go, then it's okay splitting. But if it's like a school, if it's like a mall, if it's like a place you
yeah.
eat, I think those are important. But another question to you: we've had many times because I do a lot of rebranding and branding. And like when we work on websites, there's often this quarrel between the story we're trying to say with the words and the images and the visuals that are going to give us certain emotions. But then more and more, if you want to be accessible, you need to make choices that make the storytelling a little bit less wow. Or also, like now with ecology, also, if you don't want your website to weigh too much, you need to make certain choices. And even performance wise, like for the SEO, you need to write things in a
Hmm.
specific way. And so everything practical is kind of killing our vibes in the creative
Uh,
teams.
I don't like this point of view. I think it's making us more creative because we have to um you know, with these constraints, figure out new and often like exciting, because the most elegant and the most like the best solutions are going to be good for everybody, and they're going to be like um, new things that we haven't done before, and it's going to push
I
the
did it
boundaries of
on
what
purpose there. You might get because you know me, I really like
killing our
to
vibe.
have design briefs and to think differently. But in a way, I think we need to do the mourning of how things used to be a little bit. Like accept that you can't always have a video. Accept that you can't. The websites or the spaces cannot be what they used to be. But maybe we need to make space to new type of creativity, new types of um, spaces, like whether they're physical or digital, I guess. But yeah.
So some of the best websites I've ever seen are just Times New Roman on like a black background with like white text, and they've just the way that they've done it is just so beautiful and elegant that it works. Like it's and they didn't have to use like 20 fonts and like a like animations and like scrolling and stuff. It's just like simple.
Yeah, of course.
So
We will still need a space to have different types of art exist because I love illustration, for example. And
oh yeah.
I love colors. I love, you know me. I'm like yeah, go.
But for example, so one way to make sure a website is accessible is to put alt text for all the images. So imagine you have like a beautiful illustration. The text has to describe what's in that illustration. So there's like an art to writing the alt text to evoke, you know, the feeling of the image and to describe adequately like what's in it. Because you can just be like an illustration of a bird, or you can be like you know, like you could,
I love your bot voice.
and yeah, or you know, you can describe like the way the brushstrokes are. You can describe, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
and that can be for an experience for a user who can't see, like that can be a whole experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And for the writer who's behind that, for the UX writer who's behind that, that can be like a fun game.
there
So,
needs to be, like, I'm sure there are, but I have never had the chance to attend to that. But there should be alternative creativity classes, like the new type of storytelling, and like taking all of these constraints and making them into new briefs for us to write, for us to imagine. What do you think about video? Do you think video is the evil now with
oh
all?
no, not at all. I don't have a problem with video. I think integrating videos into websites is a little complicated, but like um,
And the weight
yeah,
of
I
it,
mean,
like in terms of like energy use and stuff like that.
yeah, in terms of energy use, it's really. But I mean, I wouldn't. For example, I would never autoplay a video in a on a website or make it something that you have to watch in order to be able to understand
Yeah.
the website. It needs to be optional content, and it also needs to be accessible
Hmm.
with subtitles, for example. And but no, I don't have any particular animations. That's something I'm a little. I
Oh.
also get it because a lot of websites will have sort of unnecessary animations, and there are
Oh.
animations which are good because they can draw your attention to certain things. But if there's just like when you scroll, things are like blah, like
Those
I'm just like, come, you
animations.
don't
I
need
thought
that.
motion design, but no, you're talking about the experience animations, like
Yeah, on websites or on apps when we have animations that are unnecessary, and that
mhm.
can be really difficult for people who have certain conditions that make them sensitive to movement. And even I have some difficulty if there's like certain animations on websites. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, stop that. Stop that. Like trying to look at half the page because there's that other half that's like annoying.
yeah.
Okay, and so if I had a last question before we say goodbye, um, how do you define the word identity today in your life? Like, if someone asks you, "What is you, Kale, your identity?" What are the components of that for you?
Ah, I don't know. I'm just a person.
Aww.
I like saying that also because it's kind of like um I don't I don't really ascribe to a lot of I think categories can be very good for community.
Hmm.
Like queer, for example, I identify as queer because I am part of the queer community, not because it's some kind of label that makes me like act or think a certain way. It's just like
Hmm.
I found my people and they are queer. And the same thing for non-binary or trans or UX designer or architect. It's just like these are ways that we can describe ourselves so that we know, like, oh, you're an architect too. Okay, let's talk about
We're connectors in a way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so like for me, those things are important, but like also like um and when I say I'm a person, it's rejecting a lot of the kind of um sort of like, for example, I'm not a man, I am not a woman, I am a person. Like I don't those things are not part, I mean they are part of me, but like having one of those two labels is not, I don't identify with either of those two labels.
Hmm.
Um and yeah,
So I
so
think
yeah, I
it's
mean,
important what we identify as, and also the freedom of not having to identify. Like,
right.
okay, I,
Yeah,
I like it because I wrote down it's the sum of our connection points. It's like whatever we experience in what we are, that allows us to connect to people, the the connections we are interested in a way, maybe also.
yeah. Yeah, because I could say like I'm a drummer, I'm a cyclist too, and it's going to be fun to talk to other people who do those things. Um,
Nice. The bridges. Well, thank
yeah.
you. This was really fun, and we both know we will continue having
Yeah.
conversations like this. But I really wanted to have this as a memory for the two of us, and maybe very narcissistically. I feel like our conversations are interesting. So, ta-da! If people think so, it's cool. If they don't, well, they can just zap to the next. So, thank you so much. I love you
Yeah,
so
thank
much
you.
and hope to talk soon again.
Yep.
Take
Take
care.
care.